Hello, how are you? I hope everyone is doing well and is happy to be here. I know I am very happy to be here, and I want to tell you today about an interesting thing that happened many, many years ago. How many of you like to hear about airplanes? Does anybody think airplanes are interesting? I think things that fly are very interesting. How about something else that can fly? Can you think of other things that can fly through the air? There was something long ago that flew through the air and took people on trips, and we're going to learn about it today. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Just 1 second. Let me see mine here. There we go. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to show you a book that is very interesting. It is called Surviving the Hindenburg. Now, can you guys see the cover of my book? Yes, you are right, Yolanda. A rocket can fly into space and carry people. Absolutely. Can you guys see the cover of my book? Let me see if I can make it a little bigger. Let's see. Here, let me make it a little bigger. All right. So, okay, Surviving the Hindenburg. And you see this boy standing, or this man standing here, and he is looking at a fiery wreck, isn't he? So, but what is it that's burning? Can you tell? Can you look at the picture and tell what's burning? It's hard to see, so we're going to learn about it today. It does look like a ship, but it's on land. So let's look, and we'll read a little bit about the Hindenburg. Now, I'm going to need to zoom this in. Just 1 second. It's not letting me zoom very well, so let me fix this real quickly. Well, that's the wrong way. There we go. All right, so we're going to start here, and it says, Surviving the Hindenburg. Long ago, well, actually, I believe this is what Kay already read to you about the Hindenburg. So we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, so as the Hindenburg's cabin boy, 14-year-old Werner had many chores for the officers and crew, setting tables, washing dishes, making beds, cleaning boots and uniforms. Much of the time, Werner worked and lived on the lower deck. He helped the cooks in the kitchen. He ate meals in the crew mess, or the dining room, and slept in a snug bed inside a tiny compartment with canvas walls that he shared with one of the stewards. All right, so a big machine, yes, that's exactly what it was. All right, and so here we're going to show you, this is the boy Werner, and he is a cabin boy, so he works on the Hindenburg. Now, the Hindenburg, you can see him washing dishes. The Hindenburg was a big airship. It was like a blimp. Have you ever heard of a blimp? It's filled with air. Okay, so here we go. It's very interesting. So this is what we have, right? This is what the inside of the Hindenburg looked like underneath. To reach other places inside the airship, Werner walked the keel gangway, a narrow wooden path that ran through the belly of the Hindenburg from the stern at the back to the bow at the front. Using the gangway, he sometimes visited the mechanic station in the outer side pods, who manned the 4 roaring engines, and the riggers who worked overhead keeping a watchful eye on the gas cells and the hydrogen. In the control car, the captain and officers piloted the Hindenburg, steering it into helpful air currents and past dangerous storms. Sometimes Werner visited them too and brought along coffee. So you can see the boy who works inside these. Now, these tanks along the sides are filled with hydrogen. Does anybody know what hydrogen is? That's a big word. Do we know what hydrogen is? No, hydrogen is a gas. And the gas filled those tanks. And yes, it can catch on fire. It's a gas that filled the tanks and made the Hindenburg rise into the air and fly. What do you think of that? So this is a totally different way to fly. Now, I'm going to pause my sharing for just a second, and we're going to go back to, let's see, this front. Now, this is very, very big. Do you see how big the Hindenburg is? See, all of these are little people in the background, right? They're little people, and you can see that they are all very, very, they're running away from the fire, but it is huge. And this giant airship floated through the air, and it was to cross the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean is very large, and usually you would take an airplane or a boat to get across. Okay, let's get back to our page. Whoops, I accidentally stopped sharing. I am sorry, guys, just 1 second. I meant to hit start, and I paused it by mistake. All right. Let's see. Okay, better. All right, so here we've got Werner is looking out the window. Let me fix my page. There we go. But of all the places on the Hindenburg, Werner's favorite was a small area in the bow. From a window, Werner looked down at the blue and choppy Atlantic Ocean and at the sailboats rising and falling with the waves. Icebergs gleamed while in the sun. Sometimes, in stormy weather, Werner even saw lightning flash from cloud to cloud. Werner went to this quiet place all by himself. I couldn't pull myself away from the window, Werner would say later. I was sorry when I had to do some work. He is high above the ocean, and he's looking down. On the morning of May 6, 1937, the third day of the Hindenburg's flight, the scenery began to change. Instead of ocean, Werner saw the seashore of Nova Scotia, Canada. All right, do we know where Canada is? Canada is above, it's north of the United States. All right. Then the eastern part of the United States appeared. Excitement swept the Hindenburg. Passengers huddled around the windows of the upper deck. The Hindenburg's journey was coming to an end. Oh, you guys are in Canada. Yolanda, you're in Canada? That's great. All right, so here he is looking out the window of this giant blimp full of air and hydrogen. The people are inside, and it's very, very fancy. It's a very nice place for them to be. They are very excited, and they paid a lot of money to ride across on this. By mid-afternoon, the Hindenburg was over New York City. It circled above the busy streets of Manhattan, skimming over skyscrapers. Below, trolley cars clanged their bells. Taxi drivers honked a greeting. From the observation deck of the Empire State Building, curious tourists waved. The Empire State Building used to be the tallest building in the world. It's not anymore. There are taller buildings, but people could come up to the very top and they would wave. And you can see on his watch that it is 2:25 in the afternoon. We saw nothing but an ocean of buildings far and wide, Werner wrote in his journal afterward. The sidewalks were swarming with people. The Hindenburg was due to land at Lakehurst, New Jersey. Lakehurst, New Jersey is very near New York City. But strong headwinds over the Atlantic had slowed the airship. By the time the Hindenburg neared the airfield at 4 o'clock, it was already almost 12 hours late. Time was a precious thing, especially for Werner, especially that day. The Hindenburg was scheduled to return to Frankfurt, Germany later that evening. Because it was Werner's first visit to the United States, he had dreamed of visiting New York City in the few hours between arrival and departure. But now... So Werner, the Hindenburg had come over from Germany. And Werner was from Germany, but he had never been to the United States. So he thought it would be fun to go to New York City. Do you think it would be fun to see New York City if you had never seen it before? Has anybody here ever been to New York City? All right. Do you like it? Is it neat there? What do you think? Boy, a lot of you have been to New York City. It is very noisy for sure. Very, very noisy. Well, it is a very, very exciting thing to see. And he wanted to see it because he knew that he might never get back there. You've been to Boston? Yes, it's crowded. Boston is a very big city also. And a very pretty city also. It's cold in the winter there, though. Okay. So he had to go, he wanted to see New York City, but he had to be back on the airship to go back to Germany that night. So now he's worried he's not going to have time. Now, this is a true story. This really happened. Now, everybody look at the picture here, and I'm going to move it up so you can see. This is what the Hindenburg looked like from the outside. Do you guys see? It's what the Hindenburg looked like from the outside. And it's full of air and hydrogen gas. Do you think it would be interesting to ride in something like that? Does anybody think they would want to try it? I think it would be interesting. A storm was brewing. Landing the Hindenburg in such conditions was risky. The captain gave the order to continue flying. They would return later. It would be safer that way. The Hindenburg flew southeast and then turned north, skirting along the beaches of New Jersey and giving the passengers spectacular views. Can you imagine how pretty it must look out? They had big windows they could all look out. Yes, Yolanda, I understand. I think this might be very scary, but it would be very interesting too. So here is New Jersey and near New York, and here is the Hindenburg up high in the sky. Can you imagine how pretty it would look out the windows, though? I think the view out of the windows would be beautiful, don't you? I think it might be. All right. Now, by evening, the skies began to clear. Around 7 o'clock, the Hindenburg returned to Lakehurst. It looped over the airfield, sweeping lower as it neared the mooring mast, its docking station. While Werner put dishes away in the kitchen, more than 200 men in the docking crew swarmed the airfield, ready to grab the mooring lines that would be dropped from the Hindenburg's bow. The Hindenburg's first landing of the season was big news. Photographers and newsreel reporters readied their cameras. Spectators gawked and pointed. A mighty shout rose from the ground. There she is! So here are all the people waiting. Now what happens is they drop big lines down from the Hindenburg. And the people on the ground who work for them have to grab them and tie it to this docking station. And here are all the news reporters. And the news reporters are filming. and they have to, they're putting it on TV, right? Although it wasn't TV back then, they would play it at the beginning of movies, but they would take these videos, and people would come from far around to see it land because it was interesting. It was a little bit exciting because it was something new and different. Do you think, even if you didn't want to ride in the Hindenburg, do you think that you might want to come see it land, see how it comes back to Earth? Because I think that would be interesting to see how it comes back to Earth. So, I think so too. All right. In the officers' mess, Werner heard an announcement. 6 men forward. The stern was heavier than the bow. All right, so these are some fancy words that they use in boats and airplanes and airships. The stern is a fancy name for the back of the airship, and the bow is a fancy name for the front of the airship. And because the back end had the engines in it, it was very heavy, but the front end wasn't as heavy. So it says they have to make it level. And so because it was floating, they needed to move the people to the front to make the front heavier. The stern was heavier than the bow. Before the mooring lines could be lowered, the Zeppelin had to be leveled. To add extra weight to the bow, the captain had ordered 6 crewmen to the front. More than anything, Werner wished he could be one. The bow offered the best views of the landing, but Werner still had dishes to put away. He couldn't leave until he was finished. All right, so they're going to drop down these long lines. See this line right here? And then someone would catch them and tie it down when it was ready. But you can see that the bow is still pointed up a little. So that's why they had to move people to the front, so there'd be more weight in the front. Okay. Now, look what's happening to Werner's dishes that he just washed. And they're fancy. And they're all falling off the shelves. Werner had a coffee cup in his hand when he heard a muffled thud. He felt the Hindenburg quiver and saw a glow through the window. Without warning, the stern dropped. Dishes tumbled from the cabinet. Oh my goodness. What do you think is about to happen? Does anybody know what might be getting ready to happen? What should they do? Okay, so if the back is heavier and it's making it uneven, they sent 6 men to the front, but it didn't work. So what should they do? Do you have an idea of what they might want to do? Put more people in the front? That seems like it would be a good idea, doesn't it? I think that's what I would do. Werner ran from the officers' mess into the corridor. Corridor means hallway. Yes, let all the people go to the bow. That would make sense, wouldn't it? But maybe then the bow would be too heavy. So I think we have to be careful. He ran from the officers' mess into the corridor that led to the keel gangway. It was empty. He seemed to be the only member of the crew in that part of the Zeppelin. The Hindenburg lurched, the stern dropped, and the bow rose. From behind, Werner heard a hiss. Put more things in the front, I agree. A giant fireball tore down the keel gangway. Immediately, Werner felt its searing heat. The stern of the Hindenburg was on fire. There was no time to lose. Now remember, the Hindenburg was full of this hydrogen gas, okay? And hydrogen gas burns very easily, but it made it float. So they needed the gas to make it float. How do you think Werner felt when he saw this? Or how would you feel if you came out of a door and saw this fire? Yes, I would be very scared. What would you do if you saw this? Mad and scared? Okay, I can see why you'd be mad. You would run. I think running would be a great idea. So you would run away from the fire? Can I tell you something exciting about this book? This is a true story. So, if it's a true story, and we know what Werner said, oh, put water, that's a good idea. What do you think that means? What do you think is going to happen to Werner? You think he's going to burn? He will escape. Lisa, tell me why you think he might escape. How do you know? Exactly. Lisa, that is very smart. Lisa says if he didn't escape, then he couldn't tell his story, right? So we wouldn't know all this stuff. Okay. Oh, look at Werner now. Let's look at this picture for a minute. Look at Werner now. He's inside and he's hanging there and there's fire around him. Werner did what you thought. It says Werner ran to the bow, but he managed only a few steps. He slipped and landed on his stomach. Backward toward the fire he slid. Fighting the steep slope, Werner grabbed ropes on either side of the gangway and he crawled. A roar filled his ears. Fed by exploding gas cells, flames shot forward, leaping across the fabric, surging ahead. In no time, the fire had spread from the stern, and then to the midsection, and now to the bow. Heat scorched the soles of Werner's boots. There didn't seem to be anywhere to go, no place safe, no easy escape. Can you imagine how it would feel to be Werner? Would that be horrible? All right, so let's keep going. Do you want to keep going? Okay. Who said water? Somebody said, well, yes, Yolanda, you are right. Sad and scared is perfect. Suddenly, a cold burst of water soaked Werner. A water tank had ruptured. The water drenched his clothes and protected him from the fire. For a moment, it quenched the terrible heat. What do you think that quenched means? It says it quenched the terrible heat. What do you think that means? Okay, move away. That's a very good guess. Cool down. I think cool down is kind of what it means. It means, so he was very, very hot, but when the water came over him, it cooled him down for a few minutes. The cold shock sharpened Werner's senses too. Yes, control it. Very good. Somewhere in the smoke and haze, there had to be a way out. Werner knew of one place, a hatch, a small opening that led outside. He had used it to bring supplies aboard the Hindenburg. It was getting harder to breathe. The flames were gaining speed. The Hindenburg was breaking apart. Can you imagine how scared Werner must be? All right, so let's look. Here is Werner, and he's all wet, and there's fire all around him. That would be very scary. All right, but he's probably grateful for the water. Do you think the water helped? Do you think that if you had something that was burning and it got wet, would it burn easily? Yes, things that are wet don't burn easily. So he's feeling a little better. Yes, very good. The water did help. Okay, so here's what's happening to the Hindenburg. So look, it's breaking apart and burning. And then this is a hatch in the bottom. And here's Werner. Through the smoke, Werner saw the shadowy outline of the hatch. Using both feet, he kicked the hatch door open with all of his might. Werner saw the sandy soil of the airfield. He waited. 1 second, and then 2. The Hindenburg's stern had crumbled to the ground. Werner waited until the bow dipped and followed. Then he jumped. The soft sand of the airfield cushioned Werner's fall, but for a moment he was too stunned to move. My mind didn't start working again until I was on the ground, Werner said later, and then I started running. Okay, do you think Werner was smart to do what he did? Yes, I think he was. I think maybe if he was so scared, it might have been hard for him to remember where the hatch was. So I think he was kind of brave too. Do you think he was brave? I think he was pretty brave. And yes, Lisa, I think you are right. I think he used some luck. I think you are absolutely right. Now, we're going to finish this story and find out what else happened. But when we're finished, is there anybody that might want to see a real video of the Hindenburg and see what it looked like from the outside to the newspaper or to the news people? Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. All right, so let's find out what happened to Werner first, though. Why did it get fired? Well, we're going to learn about that too. All right, let's see. Here it is, and it's burning. When Werner was a safe distance away, he stopped. He stood and stared at the scene. There were people everywhere. Their faces were blackened with soot. Their clothes were burned and tattered. Werner realized that these were the passengers and crew from the Hindenburg. Like him, they had been lucky to escape. And you are right, Lisa, that is an excellent, excellent way to say it. Hydrogen is very flammable. But Werner also knew that not everyone had been so fortunate. What does fortunate mean? Do we know? Does anybody know that word fortunate? Lucky. You are right. After a while it came to me, he said. I lost my nerve. I cried and wailed like a baby. I didn't know what to do. Why do you think he cried? When it was all over, why do you think he cried? What do you think made him cry? Because I think there may have been a couple of things that made him cry. Yes, I agree. So Lisa says he was sad. He was sorry for the people who were still inside. Yes, he was probably sorry that he couldn't save anyone else. He was scared. He was scared. Yes. Do you think he also maybe was thinking about what could have happened to him? And yeah, and sometimes, can you imagine? Have you ever been so happy, and that you cried, like so happy you escaped? Maybe that you realized that you barely made it, maybe, and you were so grateful. Do you know what grateful means? Who knows what grateful means? Like happy? How about like thankful? Like you are so thankful that you are not in there, and then you are so sad for the people who were in there. Yeah. Some men approached Werner. They thought he was a visitor there to watch the landing. They shook me to my senses, Werner said. Get a hold of yourself and try to help someone, they told me. But there was no one left to help. In German, now we have to remember that Werner was from Germany, Werner tried to tell them who he was. Ich bin der cabin boy vom Hindenburg, he said, over and over. What do you think Ich bin der cabin boy von Hindenburg means? That's German. And what do you think it might mean? Anybody have an idea of what he was trying to say? It's, I'm a cabin boy from the Hindenburg. Yes. He was trying to tell them, I'm a cabin boy from the Hindenburg. Finally, one of the men realized what Werner was saying. Hey, this is the airship's cabin boy, he told the others. Okay. So instead of telling him you should be helping other people, do you think it changed things when they realized that he had been on the Hindenburg? Oh, wow, Lisa, you have an aunt in Germany? That's amazing. I think that probably changed their minds. They weren't telling him to help people then. They were saying, oh my goodness, he has been through a lot, right? They were probably very happy for him that he got out. All right. Werner was taken to a hangar where he was given dry clothes and warm food. Does anybody know what a hangar is? Now, a hangar here has a different meaning from a hangar where you hang your clothes. What would hangar mean here? Where do you think they took him? A place to rest. That's a good guess. A hangar is an English word that for the place where you put planes, or in this case, an airship. So a hangar is like a garage for airplanes. So do you know what a garage is? Okay. A garage is like where you park your car inside to protect your car. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be underground. So my house has a garage. It has a big door and I can open it up and I can bring my car inside. Or I actually don't do that. We actually put things in it to like tools and lawnmowers and stuff like that. But yes, it's a place where you can park your car. So a hangar is a place where they can park an airplane. Probably pretty big, huh? Okay. Other survivors joined him. Together, they sat in quiet shock, trying to understand what had just happened. Can you imagine how you would feel if you had just been through that? Later, the group visited a nearby hospital to check on the more seriously injured survivors. Some were very badly burned. Yes, Lisa, that is an excellent word, astonished. And Yolanda says she'd be mad. Who would you be mad at? Who would you be mad at, Yolanda? The airship? Okay, yeah. Some people were badly burned, and Werner knew they might never make it through the night. But the hospital was trying hard to save them. Finally, Werner was taken to the airfield barracks. Exhausted, he fell asleep. What does that word barracks mean? Here, let's highlight that word barracks. Does anybody know what barracks means? Barracks are like a dormitory. Do you know what a dormitory is? Okay, so it's kind of like a dormitory is where at school you might spend the night, or where you sleep when people live at their schools. Barracks are where people who are in the military live, so it's a lot of bedrooms. Exhausted, he fell asleep. I bet he was tired of working all day. He'd been working all day and he'd been through the crash. He must have been very, very tired. All right. The next morning, Werner received permission to go to the wreck site, to visit the wreck site. There was something he wanted, something he hoped to find. The Hindenburg was barely recognizable. Little was left that could be identified. Girders mangled and charred, windows melted and fused together, blackened serving dishes and cutlery scattered, and a single mailbag stuffed with postcards and letters from Germany. So here he is looking through all of the burned things. What did he find? Can you tell what he's holding? Can anybody tell what he's holding? A pocket watch. Exactly. Werner walked around the wreck. There he found it, his pocket watch, the one given to him by his grandfather. Like Werner, it had survived the Hindenburg. I think he was very lucky, don't you? We're going to watch the video in just a second. All right. So, after the Hindenburg disaster. So this is, there aren't a lot of pictures, so I'm going to have to just read this. Yes, it was the pocket watch from the third page. Werner Franz, that's his last name. News of the Hindenburg disaster quickly traveled to Germany. In the confusion, Werner was mistakenly listed as one of the dead or missing. Within an hour, the report was corrected, but for a short time, his parents believed he was one of the airship's casualties. So when they reported it, they thought that that Werner had died, or that he was missing, and his parents thought that he had died. In the days afterward, Werner lived with the family of Anton Heinen, a former Zeppelin test pilot who now worked for the U.S. Navy. After an inquiry into the disaster, Werner returned to Germany. Following World War II, he became a precision instrument maker. In the years that followed, he was often interviewed about his Hindenburg experience, and on several occasions he revisited the Lakehurst, New Jersey site. Currently, Werner Franz lives in Bad Soden, Germany. He is the last surviving member of the Hindenburg crew. To this day, he credits his fortunate escape to the burst of water that soaked his clothes and enabled him to flee, wet but alive. So, he is the last person who is still alive who was in the Hindenburg. So, do we want to know what caused it? What happened to cause this disaster? Because I think it is very interesting to know why it happened. Okay, so the Hindenburg Inquiry. Does anybody know what an inquiry is? That's a hard word. There is a real video, and I will show you, I promise. All right, something broke. An inquiry is where they look into it and try to figure out what happened, what went wrong, because it all happened very fast. After the disaster, theories circulated about the fire's cause. Some suspected sabotage. Sabotage means somebody did it on purpose. Others, a lightning strike or an electrical spark. An investigation was launched. Both the German and American governments inspected the wreckage, and witnesses were called in to testify. Investigators concluded that the explosion was caused by hydrogen leaking from a gas cell in the stern, possibly the result of a rigging wire that suddenly snapped and put a hole in the fabric. Static electricity, perhaps from the passing storm, ignited the escaping hydrogen. Fire spread quickly, and in 34 seconds, the Hindenburg was little more than a charred and twisted rubble. Means there was nothing left. Recently, Addison Bain, a NASA scientist, proposed a different version of events, that the Hindenburg's chemically treated fabric covering might have contributed to the fire. Bain conducted tests on fabric that had been treated with the same chemicals used on the Hindenburg and found it became highly flammable. Although his theory is controversial, that means not everybody believes it, and has been contested by some scientists, Bain believes that the fire began when a random spark ignited the fabric covering. Regardless of the fire's origin, the Hindenburg disaster changed the course of aviation. People became distrustful of all forms of Zeppelin travel, and remaining Zeppelins were dismantled. Does anybody know what dismantled means? What does dismantled mean? Dismantled means taken apart. Well, nope, they weren't forbidden, but people didn't want to ride them, so they took them apart. Newly engineered airplanes rose to take their place. Faster and more efficient, the airplane also seemed to be a safer way to cross the sea. Has everybody been on an airplane before? Tell me in the chat if you've been on an airplane. Yes. Hundreds of times. Exactly. Airplanes are very safe, but this is what they tried to do before airplanes. It's a long way to China, isn't it? From Canada. No, Jerry, you've not been on an airplane before? Or no, it's not a long way to China? All right. I'm going to stop sharing for a second so that I can share the video. Do you guys want to see the video? All right, the video is about 4 minutes long, so it's not too long. All right, I know you're excited. So, let's see. All right, here is my video. And so these are real pictures. Now, this is a very old film, okay? Because this happened in 1937. So that's almost 100 years ago. So it's about 83 years ago. All right, so this is the inside of the Hindenburg. Can you?
Over New York. These pictures made from a Pathé News plane less than 4 hours before the tragedy.
Can you guys hear that? I can't remember whether I clicked. Can you hear it? Okay. Okay, good.
Show the world's largest airship heading for Lakehurst, New Jersey. Over Newark's famous auto skyway, the airship was hailed by thousands who little dreamed it was their final glimpse of the Hindenburg. Inside the silver envelope are 16 separate gas bags, each filled with hydrogen, a highly inflammable gas. From the ground, you can see the forward control cabin from which the ship is operated. The windows along the side indicate the location of the passengers' quarters, in which many were carried to a flaming death. Approaching Lakehurst, the Hindenburg appeared a conquering giant of the skies, but she proved a puny plaything in the mighty grip of fate. It almost seemed as if fate had set the stage for the horrible tragedy. A graceful craft sailing serenely to her doom. For 3 hours, the dirigible circled the landing field at Lakehurst, New Jersey, dumping more water ballast than ever before in vain efforts to level off.
So if we go back a little bit, we can see the picture of the hangar. Remember when we talked about the hangar? Let's see.
Vain efforts to level off.
That's the hangar right there. And at the bottom of that picture, right down here, can you guys see that? Let's see. This part, right there, that's where they drove it. Okay, so the people who were flying it were right down in there. All right, we'll keep going. Whoops. Okay. You'll see it, Lisa.
Again she dumps ballast, and a nervous tension grips those who are watching, for this is something unusual.
So one thing they did to get it to level off, they would send people to the front, and that wasn't enough. So they had a lot of water that they stored on there for the passengers. And so they dumped a lot of the water out because water is heavy. And so that could change the how much the back weighs. So that's what they're doing, is they're trying to level it out, and they're doing it by dumping water out.
There goes more ballast, but the tail is settling in spite of all that has been dumped. A grim note of impending tragedy. Finally, the landing lines are dropped. These scenes were filmed by Pathé News cameraman William Deek, and you're about to see the pictures he got when the ship exploded. Those aboard leaping for life from a flaming inferno. The actual crash of the Hindenburg. An airship destroyed in less than half a minute.
Did you see the water still coming out of the bottom? And how big the fire was? Can you believe that Werner escaped? I think it's amazing that he got away. It is a miracle.
Rushing to the rescue, the heroes of the tragedy dash in, heedless of danger, to help.
This is so old. Did you see that fire truck? I'm going to back it up so that you can look again. That fire truck is from such a long time ago. Tell me if it looks like the fire trucks that you...
Rushing to the rescue, the heroes of the tragedy dash.
Did you see it? Do you see it right there? It's a tiny little fire truck. Is that what fire trucks look like where you are now? No, fire trucks I see are huge.
Dash in, heedless of danger, to help the injured to safety, while others, beyond help, perish in the flames. The blazing aftermath reveals the extent of the disaster, an inferno which became a flaming tomb of what was once a mighty airship. Her tragedy will not halt the march of progress. From her ashes will arise the knowledge, from her fate the lesson that will lead to a greater and a better means of mastering the air. If so, her dead will not have died in vain.
Let's see. These are just some pictures. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. What did you think? Whoops, sorry. So what did you think of that? Can you believe it? It's a very sad story. It is so scary. All right. Now, our book has, in the back, it had some other stories of people who survived. Do you want to hear a little more about some people who survived? I don't know. I don't think they knew William. I don't think they knew about that. So I think they were just learning and trying to create something that would work. So why don't I share one more time? Let's see. Sorry, my share screen is hidden in my second screen there. And this is some more stories. So it says other survival stories. The chances of survival depended very much on where the passengers and crew were at the time, because the fire started in the stern. Now, where was the stern again, guys? Where is the stern of the ship? Do you remember? The front or the back? The back, yes. The section that hit the ground first and then raced forward. The crew stationed at the tail fared better than those in the bow. Mechanic Richard Calmer was the first to escape. When the stern struck the ground, he escaped through the access hatch near one of the fins and ran. As the fire leaped to other gas bags, confusion swept the upper deck. Passenger Leonard Adelt said that the impact threw us from the window to the stair corridor. The tables and chairs of the reading room jammed us like a barricade. Adelt and his wife survived by dropping to the ground from a window just as the airship was about to hit the airfield. So some of these people, I think, were very lucky. What do you think? I think they were very lucky. It was pretty much a miracle. Let's see. William Bellow, one of the stewards, was in the lounge when the fire started. After helping passengers, once the bow dipped, he too jumped from the promenade window. Bellow survived with only a twisted ankle. There was a delay of a few seconds before the crew in the control car understood what was happening. As the stern dropped, the bow nose and Officer Albert Summit leaned out to look behind. "The ship's on fire!" he cried. Amazingly, all but one of those in the control car escaped the burning wreck. Some were saved in freakish ways. Mechanic Theodore Ritter was in one of the engine pods, tight and very noisy spaces on the outside of the airship. At first, Ritter was unaware that there was a problem. He saw a flash of flame, but before he could react, the explosion ripped the engine pod loose. It landed in the sand, crushed and mangled. Upon impact, Ritter was thrown out the back of the pod, suffering serious burns and injuries that required hospitalization. But he lived. Flames rushed through the center of the ship and exploded through the nose, turning the bow into a hydrogen-fed torch. Cook Alfred Grosinger was there and later said the ship seemed to rise into the air. "I planned to hold on to the frame until the ship had hit the ground and then jump." Grosinger's plan worked. As the bow crashed to the ground, he let go and landed on his feet in the sand. Although the Hindenburg is no more, in a number of ways the memory of the great ship has been preserved. Herbert Morrison broadcast. Radio broadcaster Herbert Morrison was at the airfield to cover the Hindenburg's flight of the season. As flames consumed the airship, he was overcome with emotion. He continued the broadcast anyway, his words a jumble of haunting and terrifying impressions. "It's burst into flames! Get out of the way! Please, please! Oh my, this is terrible! It is burning, bursting into flames! Oh, the humanity and all of the passengers!" Morrison's dramatic broadcast, synchronized to more footage of the Hindenburg disaster, can be viewed on YouTube. All right, so what did you guys think of this story? What did you think of this story about the Hindenburg? Did you find it interesting? Yes? I think it's interesting. Do you have any questions? Because I can't believe it, but we're almost out of time. Hi, Brandon.
Oh, hi. So I think you talked about Hindenburg today. I think it's a really great topic. And the question I like to ask is about the ships, the airships that you talked about. Is like, it has some problems on Hindenburg that, maybe the problems on the designs or the hydrogen or helium that they use is incorrect. But now why don't we fix it up to correct the mistakes that the Hindenburg have and to create the brand new one instead of the old fashioned one to let the passengers to get a new kind of like the airships.
So that's a very good question. And we do actually use um, these Zeppelins today. So there are some out there, um, and we can call them blimps. Sometimes they call them blimps.
Mm-hmm.
So let me see. I'm going to quickly see if I can get you a picture of some current ones. Let's see, 10 airships. Let's see, just 1 second. Sorry about this. It takes me just a second to get you some pictures.
Take your time.
All right. So, they do use these to fly over things. It's like football games in America and things like this. So they do happen. So this is a current one here. Hang on, let me go back to my other view here so I can share my screen with you. All right, just 1 second. So this is a current one that they're working on. So this one's a solar powered Zeppelin. So that would seem to be safer.
Yeah.
Let's see. And then this one is called the Blue Devil, and it's used for surveillance. So it's not as big as it was, but it is still very large. But you can see here's this one is one that is still a concept, but they're researching, maybe making. So this would be another one. It says this concept design for a luxury Zeppelin for the super rich would boast a restaurant, a spa on board, an onboard DJ, a viewing deck, and guest suites so you could spend the night. With gorgeous views of the bombed out zombie. Oh no, they're just joking. Made of carbon fiber and powered with solar. It's still a dream, but somebody is trying to maybe make it work. So you have very good ideas.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about airplanes was maybe too small for people to especially for fat people to sit them on. So I think the airship was a really good design for people that wasn't fit for airplanes because airplanes are pretty small. So I think maybe we can fix the old problems and make the new one like the solar panels or using other powered ones.
I agree. I think it's a great idea. It's a much more comfortable way to travel. It's not as fast as an airplane, but it's kind of like a flying cruise ship, maybe.
Yeah, thank you.
So, thank you. That was a great question.
My pleasure.
I hope everybody enjoyed our story about the Hindenburg today, and I hope it was maybe something that you didn't know about that you might find interesting.